110. Idolatry and the Invisible God. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 15 to 28, we have still another emphasis on the relationship of idolatry and law. Von Rad, who does not see the verses on idolatry, verses 15 to 20, 23 and 24, as part of the original form of this text, still recognizes that the text moves along a double tract. On the one hand, we have the declaration that the true law is the revelation and covenant of Yahweh, and on the other, the prohibition of all idolatry. But, von Rad to the contrary, the two are essentially related. To obey the covenant law of the Lord is to avoid strictly all false gods and their covenant laws. There is, moreover, an important stress in this particular declaration. First, the invisibility of the covenant God is strongly declared. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5. Unlike all other nations, Israel had no visible symbols of its God. For this reason, both the Jews and later the Christians were sometimes described by the pagans as atheists. It is important for us to treat this charge of atheism seriously. It is naive to assume that other peoples were ignorant of the details of biblical faith. The Old Testament writings were widely read by other peoples, and the New Testament history very widely known. Moreover, in view of the centrality of Jesus Christ to the Church, it would have been easier for the pagans to say with justice and truth that Christians worship Jesus Christ. To accuse the Christians of atheism introduced a subtlety of description into the attack. Here was Jesus Christ, and here were the Christians. Why was this atheism? Was it not a theism comparable to Zeus worship or emperor worship? The answer lies in the deliberate and principled avoidance by the Christians of all visible forms as symbols in worship. The emphasis on the invisible God and Saviour was a denial also of the immanent and temporal nature of God. The idols, the gods of the nations, are either aspects of nature or are the products of man's history and creation. All such gods are involved and totally involved in the historical process. They may be in ostensible advance over or superior to man in that process, but they are all the same equally a part of that same process. There is an emphatic denial of any god beyond time and history, in favour of a god or gods who are partners with man in time and history. Second, the law of a god beyond history will differ very radically from the law of a god in history. The supernatural and eternal God will declare a law over time and history in terms of his sovereign purpose and nature. A God within the temporal process and a part of it will instead always have a law conditioned by the temporal process and hence by the dominant force therein, man. Existentialism and situation ethics are logical consequences of such a religion. Moreover, for all such temporal and naturalistic religions, because the world is a closed system and self-defining, any recourse to the God beyond the world is a denial of their religion and their God, and hence is atheism. Third, the issue between God and Pharaoh was the freedom of Israel to obey its covenant God and his law. In Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 2, verse 6 and verse 13, the sin of idolatry is a summons, let us go and serve other gods. In Exodus chapter 8, verse 1, God's demand of Pharaoh is similar. Let my people go, that they may serve me. The way of service is declared later in Sinai in the law. The greatness of Moses was that he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 27. Although a prince of Egypt by adoption, he forsook Egypt, its gods and law, for the covenant God and his law. He forsook the mighty visible power of a great empire for the invisible power of the covenant God. This same issue, the Lord declares in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 15 to 28, confronts all men at all times. They must think and act as seeing him who is invisible. Fourth, in verse 20, God declares that he redeemed Israel, and in the New Testament, the same point is made repeatedly to be his inheritance or his possession. The covenant people are thus God's property, not only by creation, but also by redemption. It is the essence of idolatry and its humanistic law that man denies God's ownership to make himself a creature of time and space. As such a product of nature, he is free from God and free to dominate the worlds that's produced him as God over that world. God's law is law for man, God's property to use in governing God's kingdom or property, as God's agent or vicegerent. The covenant law is emphatic that man is God's possession or inheritance. To deny that law is to deny God's ownership and deity in favor of idolatry. Fifth, because we are God's possession, God is jealous of our unfaithfulness and idolatry. He is a jealous God and a consuming fire. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29. To turn away from the true God is national suicide. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 15 to 27. Idolatry thus cannot be treated lightly, either in ourselves or in others. It is always and invariably an evil which brings drastic judgment, and when unrepented, can lead to the death of a people. Therefore, God declares, "Learn to fear me," Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 10, a phrase repeated in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 23, chapter 17, verse 19, and chapter 31, verse 13. And a holy fear is enjoined also in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 24, chapter 8, verse 6, chapter 10, verse 12, and chapter 28, verse 58. Again, Moses speaks 10 times of God speaking, "Out of the midst of the fire," Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 12, verse 15, verse 33, verse 36. Chapter 5, verse 4, verse 22, verse 24, verse 26. Chapter 9, verse 10. Chapter 10, verse 4. Compare chapter 32, verse 22. Sixth, God declares that the very universe which men use to further their idolatrous separation from God will be his witnesses against them. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 26. Later, God declares through Moses that these witnesses, heaven and earth, will be in judgment against them when rain and fertility are withheld from them by God's judgments. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 23 and 24. Seventh, God has given idolatry, the worship of the creature, to all the covenant-breaking nations. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19. It is an aspect of their judicial blinding by God. Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, and a prelude to their judgment and destruction. Those nations which immerse themselves in history are drowned by it. To deify the temporal realm is to be the victim of history, because it is the triumph of meaninglessness and despair. History of itself can give neither meaning nor law, and those who seek gods from within history are doomed to find only the empty moment. To deny the God over and beyond time and history means the affirmation of time and history as our God and law, and hence of the moment, the only reality. This means existentialism, the commitment to the moment. We become our own gods, denying any ties of past or future from God or from eternity over us. But to be Lord of the moment is to be in bondage to its changes. As Keniston has recognized in studying alienated youth, the patterns of life and the values to which we commit ourselves today may soon become outmoded, and those who sense this, as most young men and women do, accordingly must make their commitments tentative and often are forced to prefer role-playing to deep devotion. Life then, having no reality, becomes a pretense. Role-playing and fads, trends and caprices govern man and the moments. The end of idolatry is self-destruction,